This is a public information program about the Rockport Community Preservation Committee. I'm June Michaels, a Rockport resident, and I'm going to be interviewing 3 members of the Community Preservation Committee, or CPC. The chair, Phil Crotty, treasurer, Mel Michaels, and vice chair, Erin Battistelli. The purpose of the program is to explain something about the Community Preservation Act, what it does, what kind of projects it can fund, where the money comes from, what the process is for applying for a grant, and where to get more information. I'm going to start with Mr. Michaels, the treasurer, who I believe was one of the people responsible for getting the act accepted in Rockport. Can you tell us something about the Community Preservation Act?
Yes, the Community Preservation Act was enacted on the Massachusetts General Law in the year 2000 and adopted by Rockport in 2002. It funds projects that are determined by a 9-member Rockport committee to be beneficial to the entire community. These projects are then submitted to town meeting for approval. Funding can only be used for open space, recreation, community housing, or historic preservation. The CPC is a local option law, a state law which individual cities and towns can vote to adopt. The requirements and restrictions on funding projects under the CPC are set by the state, giving local government very little leeway in interpreting the law.
So when someone stands up at town meeting and says, why don't we buy a fire truck with this money, you say, no, we can't do this. So where does the money for the projects come from?
Funds are raised by the town from a surtax on the local real estate tax. In Rockport, this is 3%, the maximum amount allowed. If your tax is $4,000, the surtax would be $120. The state provides matching funds each year in the fall based on the revenue collected locally. The source of the state match is the $50 charge on certificates filed at the Registry of Deeds and $25 on municipal liens. The money raised must be kept in a special trust fund, separate from other municipal finances, overseen by a 9-member Community Preservation Committee, the town accountant, and the town treasurer. No funds are distributed until bills are received and approved by the CPC treasurer and town accountant.
So how much has the Rockport CPC given in grants so far?
Since adopting the law in 2002, Rockport has provided $12,065,000 in grants. $4 million of this came from state matching funds. 30% went to open space and recreation, 43% to historic preservation, and 26% to community housing.
So Phil Crotty, the chair of the Rockport Community Preservation Committee, is going to tell you some more about some of the projects that have been funded to date and what the different types of projects are that qualify.
Thank you, June. I'll repeat that there are only 4 areas that we can finance. That's historic preservation, open space, recreation, and affordable or community housing. We've been very successful in funding each area every year. And I've got some photos here that we'd like to show you of our most important projects to date. In the area of recreation, a committee came together some years ago and asked for a couple of $1 million from the Community Preservation Committee to fund a restoration of Millbrook Meadow, which is right in the downtown part of Rockport. We spent a lot of time working with that committee, and I give the committee a lot of credit. They were very responsive and very persevering, and they put together quite a program which we ultimately funded to the extent of $1.2 million. This is a gem right in the heart of Rockport. These are more photos of Millbrook Meadow, and I expect they'll be coming in for even more money as we go forward.
Nice playground, Phil.
Yes, the
The
playground.
combination of open space and recreation.
It's delightful to see the children playing on that swing set there. And sometimes during the winter, you'll see people skating on the photo that I first showed.
And this project was also accomplished with private donations and some labor by the Rockport Garden Club, work in kind.
That's right. And by the way, as we fund projects from the Community Preservation Committee, we like to see other organizations working with the applying organization so that we have a multifaceted approach, not only with funding, but volunteer man hours. The next project that you'll see is the tennis courts at the school, the Rockport High School, and we have funded 3 tennis court rehabilitations in town.
Could you fund, say, an indoor basketball court with these funds?
No, we cannot fund indoor projects, but we could fund an outdoor basketball project, and as a matter of fact, we have funded one at the school, the Rockport High School.
So in Millbrook Meadow, you dredged the pond and removed all the reeds and made it a better skating area that's outdoors. And you can do that with community preservation funds, but you can't build a hockey rink.
I'd say that's accurate.
Thank you.
We do act within the scope of the law, of course, but we try to make things happen in town to the extent that's possible within the law.
Well, I think,
So-
too, Phil, over the years, hasn't it been the case where at the very beginning, as we said, the state restricts us, but then sometimes there's been pushback in different communities across the whole state saying, well, we really think that this would work. And so there has been some tweaking of the law over the years.
That's exactly right, Erin. There have been at least 2 significant court cases that
Right.
have expanded the reach of the Community Preservation Committee. So moving on now, the next area that we'll show today is the open space acquisition, and this is a project that was acquired with the Essex Greenbelt Woodland Acres, and it's a series of hiking trails in the Pigeon Cove area of town. And this is the map of Woodland Acres.
So you can buy the land, and you can also use the funding to create trails and signage.
That's correct, June, as long as it's outdoor recreation and it doesn't involve a structure, yes, that's what we can do. The next area that we will cover is historic preservation. And what you're looking at here is the community house. This was the biggest project to date. It was in the early days of the Community Preservation Act in Rockport, and it cost $2.6 million, but the building is used all the time. I'm told that there are hundreds of people every week who go through that building, everything from art projects to yoga and community meetings and such.
This is a good example of the fact that we can't always fund the entire projects out of the amount of money we have available. So this project was bonded, and so we paid it out over 30 years, and it will be finished being paid off in 2033.
Very good.
That's correct, Mel. It was a very worthwhile project. I might mention also that we did a little bond on Millbrook Meadow that was the first photo that we showed, and that has been paid off already. It was a short-term bond. But thanks to Mel, we made it happen quickly. Moving along, we'll take a look at the icon in town. This is the old sloop, the Congregational Church, and the steeple at the top was falling apart. It got a lot more complicated than we thought as we got into it, but in the end, the Community Preservation Act came together with the congregants of the church and actually Verizon with the cell tower and put together a rehabilitation of that tower or steeple at the top there, so that now when you're in town in the evening, you know very well where the center of town is.
Oh, that's a beautiful shot.
Thank you.
I think it should be stated that we don't do any religious projects, anything related to religion. And the clock in the tower, we also help fund because it turns out it's owned by the town. Very unusual situation.
Still under historic preservation, we have Thatcher Island and Straitsmith Island. You'll see the Straitsmith Island shot in just a minute. But these are, at least one of the towers is owned by the town and the other is owned by the
Mass Audubon? Or?
Massachusetts Audubon, I believe.
Yeah.
But the town takes care of both of them. And certainly the tower on the left, you have been able to climb to the top, 180 some steps, until recently, and now that's in need of more significant repair, which I believe we'll be assisting with. But the island is open to visitors, and they tell me that more than 1,000 visitors every year arrive there. They come by two ways. One is kayaks that tie up at the little building right about here, and the other is a launch service that the Thatcher Island Association operates from the T-Wharf in Rockport. And you can make reservations to take that launch service on Wednesdays and Saturdays throughout the summer season. It's a wonderful experience to go out there. There's a little museum and there are walking trails and you can actually camp overnight.
So the lighthouses are both historic preservation and also outdoor recreation if people have to kayak or take a boat trip and walk around them.
That's correct. If you categorize a project under historic preservation, you seem to have a little more leeway than if it's under recreation. That's just my observation. So if you can make it fit under historic preservation, it's a little bit to your advantage. Now this photograph is of the other island. This is the more recent one that we've sent a significant amount of money to at the Thatcher Island Association. This is the Straitsmith Island, and they've put in a new kayak ramp about where the arrow is here. You can't see it, it's off the screen, but a lot of kayaking is taking place there now. People are tying up on the ramp and walking that island. The lighthouse itself is not as magnificent as the two on Thatcher Island. It's not as high, and you can't really get into that one and climb up on it. But the Thatcher Island Association and Committee has done marvelous work on this entire island in the past several years, in part with their own monies or monies they've raised, and in part with community preservation funding. And finally, under the category of historic preservation is the American Legion Bandstand. And that's notable because Sunday nights in the summer, they run concerts there. It's a wonderful experience for Rockporters and visitors to gather at the American Legion Bandstand and have a wonderful evening of music and bring something along to eat. Turning now to community housing or affordable housing, there's a new project going on in town. It's called the Granite Street Crossing, and it's operated by a group that has already funded certain projects, community housing projects in Rockport, and done so very successfully. Harbor Light Partners. Well, we have turned over to them in the way of applications and grants over the past 4 or 5 years as much as $470,000 to help them get going with the state grants and the federal grants that are necessary to build this project out. They finally did get their money just recently, and they'll be starting construction in the spring of 2022 on a 37-unit project at this site. We also fund affordable housing for seniors, and this one is the Broadway School, the former Broadway School, where seniors reside. And we fund also supportive living for brain-damaged adults at a site in the vicinity of Halibut Point State Park in the northern part of town.
And
The
Phil,
business,
Phil, I was just going to, sorry to interrupt, but I think it's good to point out that what Harbor Lights have told us over and over again is that these kinds of projects are marathons. And as you said, once we're able to approve at our local town meeting a certain amount of funding, the state looks much more favorably on the proposed project. And then they may come back and need more money from us and gather other grants. But it's something that perseverance pays off. And it takes a number of years for all those 3 projects that you just had great photos up there, you know.
that's correct,
Yeah.
yes. Well, our biggest project right now is the renovation of the old firehouse in Dock Square in Rockport. The Town Cultural District and the Building Study Committee, I believe, have put together an application to the Community Preservation Committee to restore that old firehouse, and it remains to be seen exactly what the uses will be. There's a survey that's out right now to see what the town residents would like to see at that site, but it's a very historic building and very well situated in Dock Square, and we're looking forward to seeing nice things come of that. So, thank you, June.
So how much do you give out in the average year?
Well, in the course of a year now, we give out somewhere between $600,000 and $800,000. I'm pleased to report that this year, as we go into our January and February application process, we have $950,000 that will be coming in. $600,000 of it will be coming from Rockport residents from their tax bill, and $350,000 will be coming from the state in a match. So that's a very nice number that we have available this year, and we hope to see a lot of fruitful applications coming in.
So I'd like to turn to Erin Battistelli, the CPC Vice Chair, to explain a little about how you apply for an application. So to start with, the committee, who serves on the CPC committee?
So the Community Preservation Committee has, as Mel mentioned earlier, consists of 9 members. There are 4 at-large that are appointed, Rockport citizens appointed by the moderator. And then we have representatives from the Planning Board, the Historic Commission, Conservation Commission, and in our case, the DPW, which represents Parks and Recreation. So do you want me to talk about the process?
And what is your timeline?
Sure. So the application process begins actually almost today, because right after we're filming this, we are holding a workshop for the public it's in Zoom form today at 3 o'clock, to educate people about what the CPC is, describe the application process, and encourage people to think between now and a deadline that I'll get to right now, about projects that they could consider under the different categories that both Phil and Mel have mentioned. After this workshop, we're hoping that people go to the town website, look at the application form. There's a 2-page form. It's not terribly complicated at all. And then there's a 12-page detailed instruction document that people can go and read to understand what kind of information we're going to need for you to actually fill out the application. So the next step for our committee is a deadline of February 7th, 2022. It's always the first Monday, I think, in February. So in this case, it's February 7th. All applications are due. We accept them online electronically now, which is a lot easier, or through the town clerk's office. Once all the applications are received, our committee members meet in February, March, and April having the different applicants come in for each of the meetings. All of our meetings are public, and the public is encouraged to attend. They're either in Zoom, which they've been for the last year and a half. Generally, we meet up at the police station if we're going to be in person. As we ask questions about the applicants, they might go back to the drawing board, so there may be a second callback for some of the applications. Some that are incredibly straightforward, maybe there's one meeting about them. So in May, that's when we would call back applicants. And then beginning June and July, the committee will vote on what projects we would be suggesting to town meeting in September that we would recommend town meeting vote for.
So the committee votes what it approves, but it still requires a town meeting vote on its recommendations.
Yes, town meeting is the next step, and anything that is recommended by town meeting then actually has to go to the Attorney General's office to just make sure that what we have come up with and what the project consists of meets the criteria that the state has set forth.
What sort of information do you look for, and what sort of questions do you ask the applicants when they come before you?
Sure. So we look for who is this going to benefit? You know, the larger number of people for Rockport residents who would benefit from the project. You know, we'll look at that situation. Public support. In the application, we encourage letters of public support, photos of what you're anticipating, but that's very important. Your timeline, you know, how will this fit into if, for example, a project needed to be done in 3 months, then we may not be able to accommodate you because we do need to go to town meeting months from there. The other thing I think Phil mentioned earlier, that it's really important to us that you are looking at other funding sources, whether it's grants, donations, and also the volunteer effort. So a combination of CPC, grants, volunteerism, that, you know, creates a project where you feel like everybody's vested. So those are the kinds of things we look for.
So, Mr. Michaels, can a project get any money up front to study the feasibility of the project?
Yes, we can spend up to $10,000 for a pilot project, a survey of open space, or an evaluation of the condition of a historic building. This provides professional input on the feasibility of a project before committing big dollars to it. And I want to add something that the February 7th deadline is absolutely firm. You need to get it into the town clerk's office to be stamped by 5 o'clock on that date. And unless there's an emergency situation, and those are rare, we will not accept an application after that date.
Are there any restrictions on who can apply for a grant?
Any town department, town committee, or town nonprofit organization may apply. The key factor to qualify for a grant is that the project must fit into one of the 4 categories defined by the law. Expenses covered by grants may include purchases of land for recreation and development of trails and parks for outdoor recreation, but cannot include structures for indoor recreation. Restoration, renovation, and even replacement of structures are covered, but not routine maintenance or any annual operating cost.
Could I clarify?
Yes.
I'm still learning, so I always ask Mel questions because he's been on the committee for quite a while. So if an individual or a group, not technically a nonprofit, had a good idea, what would be the suggestion? Because could they go to a town committee or a town department, and if they got support from that department, they could work with that department or committee to move forward on a project?
Yes, one of the requirements is that you get support from a town committee. That is necessary so that you, even if you come as an individual and you go to a town committee and they support you, then you can bring your application forward.
Great.
But without town committee, some town committee support, we probably will not accept the application.
Okay.
And there are relevant committees like the Historic Commission and the Conservation
Right.
Commission and the Housing Authority that, and the DPW Parks and Recreations that, you know, come under those.
Yeah,
We have the Rights of Way Committee,
right,
the Beautification Committee, the Cultural District.
yeah.
You can find a committee generally if you have a good project. And we might also point back to the Millbrook Meadow Committee that was not a committee. It didn't exist. And a number of residents got together and formed this committee, went to the town, and the town made it a town committee. And lo and behold, they got their money from the Community Preservation Committee and other sources and put together this beautiful park, the gem of the town.
One other thing I want to add is if you have any questions, you can always ask a committee member to help you and to work on the application with you.
Right.
So, Mr. Crotty, could you tell us a few more of the restrictions on the applications?
Well, it really comes back to just fitting into one of the four categories: historic preservation, open space, recreation, and affordable housing. If you've got something that can be linked into that in any way, no matter how remote it might be, put together an application and come see us. As Erin said, it's only 2 pages, and it can be done online electronically, so take your best shot. And I would also urge you to think big. The project that is on the screen there, the steeple at the Congregational Church and Millbrook Meadow and Thatcher Island, these were all big projects, big ideas. So there must be 1 or 2 more left in town. Please come forward with them and see how far you can go with community preservation funds. Take a chance. As I said, the application is easy and it's a wonderful program, and you're not competing with other municipalities. You just coming to your town resources, and the money is there and can be handed out very quickly, and there's no administrative funds on our end to take part of the money. It all goes to your project.
So, Mr. Michaels, are grants limited to town-owned property?
Well, grants are not limited to town-owned property. We have given grants to privately owned historic structures, such as the Old Tavern, which belongs to the Rockport Art Association because they're historic buildings and are open to the public. We have not given any funding to private homes because there are strict regulations on how historic preservation is to be carried out and how much public access is to be permitted. Buildings are not only historic, wait a minute, excuse me. Buildings are not the only historic items which qualify. We have given grants to the preservation of town-owned artworks and archives. Also, the preservation of a historic view or scenery would qualify for a historic as well as open space grant. We could even pay for the refurbishment of stones in cemeteries that are historic. So we could look forward to that too. People like to go to the cemetery and check our history. And I think that's an important project that should come to us.
So, we're coming to the end of our public information program. Mr. Crotty has a final remark to make.
I think you need to be careful not to come to us for maintenance programs. We've had that happen. It's got to be in the nature of restoration or something innovative. No maintenance. And I just want to say again that this is an outstanding program that the state has put together. Rockport opted into it early on. Rockport's in for the maximum. And as Mel said, we've distributed over $12 million so far, so there's more to come. Please come see us.
I want to thank the Chair, Phil Crotty, Vice Chair, Erin Battistelli, and Treasurer, Mel Michaels of the Rockport Community Preservation Committee for putting this public service program together, and 1623 Studios for taping it for us.